Music transcends all boundaries, whether they're cultural or language. No matter who you are or where you're from, everyone can be ignited by a love for music. With so many genres and subgenres existing, communities are built around these like-minded people coming together over a love for music. While music can be uplifting and positive, it isn't always that way. Here are 5 songs with creepy backstories. Number 5. Michael Jackson is known as the king of pop, and for good reason. His album Thriller sold 47 million copies, making it the most popular album of all time. While his music is upbeat pop, some songs do have creepy backstories. The song Billie Jean narrates a story between Michael and a woman named Billie Jean, who is claiming that her child is his. While this might seem like a hypothetical situation from a fangirl, the song is rooted in truth. Michael was no stranger to letters from obsessive fans. Usually, he would disregard them and get on with his life. However, in 1981, he started to receive multiple letters from a woman professing her love for him and stating that she was pregnant with their child. She was extremely angry with Michael and asked how he could just ignore his son. The letters continued disturbingly, with each letter becoming more and more explicit. Michael even said that he suffered from nightmares and became more introverted as he was so scared of the letters. This terrifying ordeal came to an end when she sent a final letter accompanied by a picture of herself and a gun. She told Michael that she would have to end his own life and she would end hers and their child's so that they could all be together in the afterlife. After investigation, it was found that the woman had been submitted to a psychiatric unit and was extremely unwell at the time of writing the letters. He wrote Billie Jean as a way of dealing with this ordeal without having to address the woman head-on. He told NME magazine Billie Jean is kind of anonymous. It represents a lot of girls. They used to call them groupies in the 60s. There were a lot of Billie Jeans out there. Every girl claimed that their son was related to one of my brothers. Number 4. Every Breath You Take was written by the British band The Police in 1982 and released on their final album in 1983. It quickly rose to popularity and stayed at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart for 8 weeks. While the song sounds like a soft love song devoted to watching over someone, the true meaning behind the song is much darker. The frontman of The Police wrote the song after he split up from his first wife, Frances Tomalty. To escape the public eye for a while, he retreated to the Caribbean and began songwriting. While many interpret the song as being a love song, the truth is that the song is about an obsessive stalker. In a 1983 interview, the frontman said, "I think it's a nasty little song, really rather evil. It's about jealousy and surveillance and ownership." The lyrics can be broken down into segments, with breath analyzers, motion detectors, polygraph tests, tracking devices, bugs, and video surveillance being inferred by the lyrics. The line "every move you make" is not sweet and innocent and refers to the stalker watching his victim's every move. One of the lines is "I'll be watching you," reinforcing the stalker's narrative. Gary T. Marks, a sociologist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, commented that the song uses a tactic called care control, whereby victims are led to believe that they're being subjected to abuse and control because their abuser cares so much about them and doesn't want them to be harmed. Remember, wherever you are, there could be someone watching you. Every move you make and every breath you take, they'll be watching you. Number 3. Pearl Jam is regarded as one of the best grunge bands of all time. Their entrance to the music scene in the 1990s helped solidify the grunge movement and inspired the genres that came after them. While some members of the band have now passed, the band are still making music with new musicians and continue to inspire people across the world. The song Jeremy is one of the darkest songs written. It follows the story of 16-year-old Jeremy Dell. He shot himself in front of his English class at Richardson High School in Texas in 1991. The song also draws inspiration from Eddie Vedder's own personal experience at school. He told a reporter, "I actually knew somebody in junior high in California that did the same thing. Just about anyway. He didn't take his own life, but ended up shooting up an oceanography room. He kind of freaked out, brought a gun to class one day, and shot a fish tank." Jeremy Dell was described as real quiet and known for acting sad, typical behavior that's often seen in teenagers. The Pearl Jam song correctly depicts Jeremy. He was a budding artist with so much potential. He'd won awards from state fairs for his artwork all before the age of 12. His family still have his paintings hung up around the house. On January 8, 1991, Jeremy arrived to his English class late, and he was told he needed to report to the school office to get an attendance slip. He did as he was told and left the classroom, but instead of returning with the pass, he returned with the revolver. Everyone in the classroom was stunned, thinking that perhaps Jeremy was going to shoot them. Instead, he calmly made his way to the front of the classroom, turned to the teacher and said, "Miss, I got what I really went for," before putting the gun in his mouth and pulling the trigger. The whole class was in a state of shock, and even to this day, classmates still talk about the traumatic event they witnessed. For the first time since their son's death, the Dell family gave an interview in 2018. His mother, Wanda, told ABC WFFA, "That day he died did not define his life. He was a son, a brother, a nephew, a cousin, a grandson, and he was a friend. He was talented. I was in my office at work. I didn't believe it. I was in shock. Not my son. I was going to pick him up that afternoon from school." Wanda was also angered by the Pearl Jam song, saying, "I was angry at them for writing that song. I thought, you don't know, you weren't there. That story isn't accurate." Pearl Jam said there was no malicious intent behind the song, and they learned of the incident after reading about it in the newspaper. The song acts to highlight mental health issues and how they affect everyone, even those who seem to have everything. If you or a loved one is struggling with mental health issues, please reach out because you are loved, whether you want to believe it or not. Number 2. Much like Pearl Jam, Nirvana is credited as being one of the bands who kickstarted the grunge movement in Seattle in the 1990s. Before the tragic suicide of their frontman, Kurt Cobain, the band was headed for big-time success. The song Polly is incredibly disturbing, and Kurt wrote it after he read an article about a crime committed in Tacoma, Washington in 1987. A 14-year-old girl, who Kurt nicknamed Polly, was kidnapped after walking home from a concert at the Tacoma Dome. Instead of dropping her home, the driver of the vehicle, 49-year-old Gerald Friend, pulled a knife on Polly and took her to his mobile home. Over the course of a few days, Friend beat and sexually assaulted Polly, keeping her tied up by her arms. The brutal beatings weren't the end for Polly, and she was even burnt with a blowtorch. Luckily for Polly, she was able to escape after she accompanied her captor to a petrol station. She was able to break free from the car and ran inside, screaming for someone to help her. This wasn't Gerald's first attack either. He'd been arrested once before for a similar crime, but paroled in 1980 for good behavior. When police caught up with him, he was sentenced to finish his first sentence for 75 years, of which he'd served 20, plus another 75 years for the attack on Polly. Kurt wrote the song in an ode to Polly to highlight the darkness of the world we live in. Kurt was incredibly outspoken about women's rights and liberation. Nirvana's music acted as activism for the community around them, bringing attention to taboo topics. Number 1. Brenda Spencer was a depressed and disenfranchised 16-year-old living in San Diego, California. Her upbringing certainly wasn't the best, and following her parents' divorce, she lived with her father in a small apartment facing the Grover Cleveland Elementary School. Her father was an alcoholic, and the two lived in abject poverty. Brenda would sleep on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by waste and alcohol bottles. Her living situation greatly affected her well-being, and in 1978, she was referred to a facility for troubled children. She was said to be suicidal and would often hurt animals. The facility recommended that Brenda be taken to an inpatient facility where she could be treated for her depression. However, her father didn't believe in mental illness nor treatment, so he refused to let her go. His solution to Brenda's problem was to buy her a gun. In Christmas 1978, he bought his depressed, angsty daughter a Ruger 1022 semi-automatic .22 caliber rifle with a telescopic sight and 500 rounds of ammo. He thought if he gave something for Brenda to channel her energy into, she wouldn't be so depressed anymore, but instead she did the unthinkable. When later interviewed in prison about the gift from her father, Brenda said, "I asked for a radio and he bought me a gun. It felt like he wanted me to kill myself." On January 29, 1979, Brenda Spencer opened fire at the Grover Cleveland Elementary School, just across from the apartment she shared with her father. In the ensuing chaos, 8 children were harmed, with Principal Burton Ragg and a school custodian, Michael Suchar, being shot dead by Brenda. When asked by the San Diego Union Tribune why she had done it, she said, "I just started shooting, that's it. I just did it for the fun of it. I don't like Mondays. I just did it because it's a way to cheer up the day. Nobody likes Mondays." Irish musician Bob Geldof was inspired to write the song titled "I Don't Like Mondays" after hearing about the shooting on the radio. In his own words, he said, "I was doing a radio interview in Atlanta with Johnny Fingers, and there was a telex machine beside me. I read it as it came out. Not liking Mondays as a reason for doing something is a bit strange. I was thinking about it on the way back to the hotel and just said silicon chip inside her head had switched to overload. I wrote that down, and the journalist interviewing her said, 'Tell me why.' It was such a senseless act. It was the perfect senseless act, and that was the perfect senseless reason for doing so. So perhaps I wrote the perfect senseless song to illustrate it. It wasn't an attempt to exploit a tragedy." Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.